I never imagined a person could become a ghost in the life they'd built with you, present in routine, absent in truth. Her name was Hira. For years, she anchored our days, shared coffees, the small rituals of being a married couple, the private jokes that made strangers think our life was easy. I loved her so badly I forgot how to keep a ledger of my own heart. Then one ordinary afternoon pulled the rug out from under me. It began with a receipt. I found it stuck between the couch cushions while looking for change, a late night charge at a place I didn't recognize, a timestamp that didn't belong to any story she'd told. At first, I convinced myself it was a mistake. People make mistakes, but the doubt nudged me, turned persistent, and I started to notice things I'd learned to ignore. Hurried phone calls she ended when I walked in. Lipstick on a collar I promised to toss in the wash. Little white lies about meetings and errands that piled into an unsightly heap. I could have exploded. Most people imagine that seen teeth bared anger, glass crashing, accusations flung like knives. That would have been loud theatrical, the kind of thing that makes good gossip and bad decisions. I didn't want spectacle. I wanted something she couldn't charm away. I wanted her to remember. The way a wound remembers the bandage once it has fallen off, and the air finds the scar dot, so I became patient, which felt almost traitorous at first. I watched without stalking, noted without theatrics. I kept a small notebook in my bedside drawer and labeled it errands, so a glance would read ordinary. There I recorded dates, times, snippets of overheard phrases, names that surfaced in messages she thought I wouldn't see. When she slipped an unguarded laugh at a text or a sudden need to catch up with a friend, I wrote it down. I made copies of receipts, screenshots of messages, photos of taxi stubs left in the glove compartment. It was dull domestic work, tracing patterns, not chasing monsters. While I cataloged, I didn't let my life shrink. I picked up the parts of me she'd taken for granted. I went back to morning runs that cleared my head. I read books that didn't mention us. I met people who had known me before marriage and had no interest in our private theater. The point was not indifference. The point was solidity. A man who planned revenge on a wobbling foundation falls with the house. I built scaffolding, friends, hobbies, a clear bank account split that only I managed. Small things, but they studied me. Her arrogance did the rest. People who cheat often behave as if invisibility is a cloak. It makes them careless. She grew sloppy, dates misaligned with receipts, names repeated across different threads. One night, she forgot to log out of a messaging app on the living room tablet. A name flashed in the corner, and then she swatted it away like a fly. That was the night my notebook swelled with the kind of detail that doesn't beg for interpretation. I did not broadcast her. There is a cruelty in turning private wounds into public sport, and I was not interested in cruelty for cruelty's sake. What I wanted was accountability, not humiliation. The smartest way to ensure consequence is to place the right evidence in the right hands and let structure do its work. So I picked her manager and someone from HR whom I had casually met at a company event months earlier. I didn't trap them. I asked for a conversation and presented facts. Not melodrama, dates, overlapping schedules, taxi receipts that matched times of supposed late work, and messages that indicated an intimacy beyond friendship. I framed it plainly. Professional boundaries had likely been crossed. That phrasing mattered. People who defend institutions respond to breaches of policy. People who are affronted by gossip respond to spectacle. The HR inquiry was careful and procedural. There were meetings with agendas and notes, polite but firm interviews. Her partner at work, who had been casual with jokes and innuendo suddenly, answered emails in 3 lines and kept his calendar clear. Colleagues who had once covered for late-night calls now cleared their throats at the next team meeting. Nothing dramatic happened in the hallway. Nothing viral ever did. Consequence, I learned, is quieter and more absolute when it slides in through policy and paper rather than rumor and wrath dot at home. I changed the terms of our life. I stopped covering for her. Small things matter. When she suggested, I'll handle the bills this month, I asked for receipts. When she invented errands, I asked for details. The tiny infringements she had used as camouflage were no longer available currency. She tried charm old rehearsed lines about stress, a tired explanation, a plea I'd heard before. Charm had been a currency she spent freely. Now it returned insufficient. The reckoning evening I planned was ordinary. I cooked her favorite meal, set the table, closed the blinds. Ordinary is intimate. It strips away the safety of performance. I placed the folder on the table and didn't speak for a while, letting the clink of cutlery and the slow music sit like a prelude. When I finally opened it, I didn't shout. I read out dates and facts, no venom, no flourish, just the ledger of what she'd done. Each entry landed like a coin dropped into water. There was no theater to distract from the weight of evidence. She tried every escape route: denial, tears, blame. The usual choreography of someone used to getting out of trouble. But the ledger doesn't negotiate. It just is. When charm fails, people look smaller, less dangerous, more ordinary. For someone who had learned to rely on others' kindness, that smallness is devastating. She realized, in the space between a breath and a reply, that the cushion she had relied on, my silence, our mutual friend's willingness to assume the best, was gone. What followed wasn't fireworks. She faced a jar. She faced awkward lunches and fewer invitations. The partner at work was moved to another project. Friends asked direct questions in coffee shops instead of assuming. The life she'd maintained on a scaffolding of secrecy and forgiving smiles collapsed in soft, irreversible ways. She could rebuild, of course, but the ease was gone. Rebuilding requires truth, and the truth was now a ledger she had to answer to. I won't pretend I felt nothing. There were nights I sat with the folder and felt a hollow relief that hurt. Retribution is not the same as closure. Sometimes it's a waypoint. But I also felt a steady satisfaction that came from having refused to be small in the face of being betrayed. I had taken care not to trade my dignity for a moment of cruelty. I had used structure, patience, and my own regained life as instruments of consequence. She will never forget what I did next. Not because I shouted it from rooftops, but because the life she had been living careless, effortless, cushioned by my complicity, changed in ways she couldn't reverse with an apology. The people who had smoothed over her edges now stepped back. The routines that had formed their marriage became deliberate choices instead of defaults. I had reclaimed my days, my privacy, my financial boundaries, and the right to expect honesty. Months later, I found mornings quieter but truer. I made coffee with the same hands but felt lighter holding the cup. She moved through the apartment like a guest, learning to live with consequences. Revenge, in the end, was not about vengeance. It was a reclamation of dignity, of rules, of a life not to be taken for granted. She had cheated. I had suffered. What I did next made sure she never treated that bridge as a mere crossing again.